So again, my name is Larry Dawson. I'm one third of the regional administrators who provide administration for the CEJA workforce programs. I'm joined by them, and they'll be carrying parts of this presentation today. We also have our a couple of our grantees who will be here to speak to you as well. And why don't we go ahead and get started? Next slide, please. So our agenda today is broken up into several sections. We're going to go through our purpose of being here, that this is our third round of funding for the CEJA workforce programs. We still need grantees for several of the areas, and we'll be talking about those in a moment. Also providing some brief program overviews and clarifications of the two programs in particular that we're focused on, the Clean Jobs Workforce Network Program and the Energy Transition Navigator Program. Also, as you can see, this is round 3 of our solicitations for these grants. And so we've had an opportunity to learn quite a lot over the last few months in the previous rounds. And so we've distilled those learnings and added them to today's presentation. We'll be talking about things like resources, tips, and experiences from applicants who've been awarded CEJA grants that hopefully will help you in your journey to apply, hopefully successfully, for one of these available areas. And also, we will also include the mini grant writing workshop exercise and an opportunity to see some of the application resources that are available. Next slide, please. So what is the Climate Equitable Jobs Act? It is a comprehensive landmark energy legislation in Illinois that centers equity and puts Illinois on track to achieve 100% renewable energy by 2050. And some of the intermediary goals are to reach 40% renewable energy by 2030 and then 50% by 2040. These are ambitious goals, we realize, and the legislation provides to reach these some funding and programs to support these goals. And it also includes energy access and solar for all, with renewable energy components, energy efficiency components, and initiatives as initiatives to try to help us get to the carbon-free power state that we would like to have. It also includes funding for things like electric transportation and fossil fuel workers support for them and their families, as well as one of the main goals is for us to achieve carbon-free power by 2045 with the closing of all fossil fuel plants in Illinois. And then finally, to energize all of this activity, we're going to need a talented workforce. And so we're putting in place these programs to hopefully grow organically this workforce to meet that demand of all of these clean energy technologies and services that will be required as we build our clean energy economy. Next slide. And so we talk about workforce development and how does it fit into the larger CEJA initiative? Well, Illinois is investing in clean energy sources, electric vehicles, energy efficiency, and we need to expand our workforce to meet that challenge. We know that some groups of people and communities benefit more from current and past clean energy investments, while some other communities suffer more from environmental impacts and community disinvestment. So one of the goals of our CEJA programs is to ensure that the benefits of clean energy investments and good paying clean energy jobs are distributed equitably. Next slide. So what is the Clean Energy Jobs Act workforce ecosystem? If you've been to a few of our webinars in the past, this will start looking familiar to you, but there are essentially 4 equity-focused workforce training programs. that are in this workforce, the CEJA workforce ecosystem. And the goal of these 4 programs is to prepare people for employment in the clean energy sector and apprenticeship placement as well. Now, the people who are hired by these clean energy employers will be able to grow their capacity to work on clean energy projects that are also funded through CEJA and other state and federal legislation. Now, along the way, there are barrier reduction funds to support participants who may have barriers to participation. These funds can help provide things like transportation, healthcare, childcare, housing, food assistance, and other supports for folks to ensure that they can enroll in and stay in CEJA programs. The Clean Energy Jobs, Clean Jobs Workforce Network Hubs will work with employers and other partners to provide transition assistance to make appropriate job or apprenticeship placements for the program participants. Next slide. So the 4 programs that I just talked about are focused more on workforce development. But the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity is also launching 3 equity-focused economic development programs. And these programs are meant to help contractors expand their capacity to do clean energy projects that are funded by CEJA and other legislation. So the 3 programs listed here, Contractor Incubator Program, Primes Contractor Accelerator Program, and the Equitable Energy Futures Grant Program, will be helping clean energy contractors and businesses that are adjacent to clean energy would like to pivot into clean energy. We'll be helping them to receive the resources, the funds, and the support to grow their businesses and take advantage of opportunities to bid on clean energy projects and do the work to get our state to 100% renewables by 2050. And also, hopefully, and most importantly, to hire CEJA-trained workers as their businesses expand. Next slide. So now to kind of go over each of these programs in a little bit more detail. The one that people ask us the most about, the one of the 2 that we're here for, is the one that's receiving the largest amount of funding programs in the clean energy jobs workforce programs. It often is referred to as the workforce hubs or the clean jobs hubs. The goal of this program is to prepare people for good paying entry-level clean energy jobs by providing clean jobs training, which will utilize a standard clean jobs curriculum. And the program will be delivered at 14 hub locations throughout the state. And I'll show you those in just a minute. And for funding, there's $24 million per year of funding, of program funding, in addition to $15 million that's been set aside for barrier reduction services or wraparound services and other student supports that will be provided statewide through this program. It's going to be delivered by community-based organizations and their partners. And we're very excited to finally get this out, and we're glad that you could join us for this discussion today. Now, some of the tasks that the grantees who are delivering this program will be responsible for are things like coordinating with the navigators on recruiting participants, providing the clean jobs training, providing robust wraparound supports, and finally, job placement and transition support to help get folks into the jobs of their dreams and help them to succeed in those jobs. Now, next is the Energy Transition Navigator Program. And the main goal of this program is to increase the awareness of and participation in the CEJA programs. They'll be providing recruitment and enrollment services in conjunction with the Clean Jobs Hubs and engagement generally throughout the communities in Illinois to help support the CEJA workforce programs and the overall CEJA ecosystem. This will be delivered throughout the state in the 14 regional hub areas and the supporting area and the surrounding areas as well. And this program will have a total of $6 million of funding statewide per year, and it'll be delivered by community-based providers, which are local nonprofits, and their partners that will be assisting them in this effort. In addition, stakeholder engagement is also important as a part of this, raising awareness of local employers about this opportunity and the talent pipeline that it creates, as well as it's important to note that the Energy Transition Navigators is a separate program from the Climate Works and the Network Hubs, but the Navigators will be serving both programs and doing recruitment and providing information in the community at large about the CEJA programs. Next slide. And so this is the map which identifies the remaining areas for workforce hubs: Carbondale, Danville, Kankakee, which I'll touch on in a moment, Peoria, and then ET Navigators, Champaign, and Kankakee. Now, one difference between Kankakee, and which is marked in red, and the others is that the legislation has identified a start date for the newest of the 14 hubs, Kankakee, to be July 1st of 2025. So that notice of funding opportunity is on a slightly different timeline than the rest. We anticipate opening the notice of funding opportunities for those within the next couple of weeks, whereas Kankakee will follow potentially later in the fall or early at the start of 2025. Next slide. So while we're soliciting for applicants for both the hubs and navigators at the same time, it is important that we realize that each one of these grants has a different focus. The hubs provide training and connect the graduates to job opportunities, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. These open areas, as I mentioned, are for the hubs are Carbondale, Danville, Peoria, and Kankakee. Each grant will be awarded up to $5 million, depending on the work plan that is identified for your targeted area, population size, and available funding. And it's important to note also that the eligibility for applying for this program requires that the organizations be community-based organizations, and they can also bring on partners. And we heavily emphasize the importance of partners to ensure that all key tasks under the grant are handled, as well as full coverage for the geographical area that you target. Next slide. Now, successful workforce hubs are required to do all of these essential components of the program, serving all individuals, including diverse and equity-focused populations, recruiting, pre-screening, and providing training to provide the workers, to prepare those workers for employment. Provide training using the Clean Jobs Curriculum Framework, which we'll talk about in a moment, which also provides barrier reduction services and transition services, connecting and making agreements with local employers and other entities for work-based learning opportunities, job placement, on-the-job training, and making sure that all of this is done within accessible locations across the given region. Next slide. So here is the overview of the jobs curriculum framework. After being screened for past work experiences, abilities, and career interests, participants go through the Bridge program for work readiness. This prepares them with the basics for energy-related jobs and includes topics like workforce safety, first aid, CPR, and personal effectiveness skills. Then they move on to one of the job-specific trainings offered by the hubs, which the hubs are required to offer at least 2 training curriculums. Some have chosen to offer more. And these courses prepare the participants for industry-recognized credentials for the career in their chosen field. Then the grantees assist with transition services like resume preparation, interviewing practice, and referrals to employer partners and follow-up for at least a year after placement to ensure the participants' success. Next slide. And then there's the Energy Transition Navigator Program, which I mentioned before is primarily responsible for the outreach and recruitment for the two primary workforce programs, Hubs and Climate Works. And it's of critical importance that navigators work with very closely the Climate Works and Network Hubs programs grantees so that they can calibrate the number of people who are recruited with the number of available slots. And it's also important that the navigators and the training entities have close communication. So as the navigators are doing the outreach and informational events in the community, that they know all of the available programs and curriculum topics that the various hubs offer so that they know where the correct place is to forward or refer each participant based on their career aspiration. It's also important to note here that there's a $6 million per year statewide funding level for this program, which is replenished each year, and each grantee can be awarded up to $600,000 for their grant for each year. Next slide, please. And so the Energy Transition Navigators support all of the CEJA workforce programs, but particularly the network hubs and pre-apprenticeship. Recruiting applicants, conducting some education and outreach, building those deep connections with the community, and using that rapport that's been built to ensure that everyone is aware of these opportunities. And also helping to engage employers with all of that activity in the local community. We expect navigators to also assist in the process by directing employers who are interested in finding well-trained workers in the energy industry to use the pools of talent that the hubs and the Climate Works grantees create. Next slide. So again, the two focus programs are the hubs and the pre-apprenticeships, but there's also other programs that will be in play as well, like the Contractor Incubator Program, which is soon to be launched as well, that focuses on small businesses. It's important that the navigators be aware of all of the various tools within the CEJA ecosystem or toolbox, if you will, so that they can direct community participants to the program that's right for them. For individuals who are looking for training to find jobs in the clean energy economy, the workforce programs. And in some cases, there are individuals that the navigators cross paths with who are interested in starting businesses. And in that case, they can be directed to the incubator programs. And we also recognize that there are some participants who will come into the navigator or the hub with interest in finding a job, but after being made aware of the various opportunities, perhaps maybe a stronger career desire lies outside of the clean energy industry. And so it's important that the navigators continue to develop relationships, not just within the CEJA ecosystem, but also with the larger workforce infrastructure as well, so that referrals can be made to the proper place so that folks can get the training to pursue the career that they're most interested in. Next slide. So as a navigator, some of the most important things you need to keep in mind, again, coordinate closely with the CEJA workforce programs. And so This is a bit of a hint to include in your application your intention and your plan to coordinate with the established hub or ClimateWorks grantee. Also, your plan for providing outreach and community education about the various CEJA programs, how you'll provide services in conjunction with the hubs and ClimateWorks grantees to help people get enrolled in these programs, and also your experience in engaging with the targeted communities that you will be applying to serve. Next slide. So we've talked about the general functions of the two various programs, but it's also important to look at how we're targeting and how the various hub areas were defined. They were defined and chosen based on the uh, high numbers of individuals who the legislation identifies would be eligible who live in those various communities. And so let's take a look at the eligibility criteria, prioritization criteria for all of the CEJA programs. To dig a little bit deeper. So the eligibility is a little different for each program. And it's important to understand the eligibility for all of these programs, especially for those applying to be a navigator, is you'll be providing essentially the initial outreach and referrals. So for the workforce, the ClimateWorks pre-apprenticeship program, applicants need to be at least age 16 or older and must be on track to receive their high school diploma or GED or equivalent by the time they complete the program. The ClimateWorks hubs shall recruit, pre-screen, and provide pre-apprenticeship training to equity investment eligible persons, which means essentially people who would most benefit from equitable investments by the state designed to combat discrimination and foster sustainable economic growth. Specifically, eligible persons means persons whose primary residence is in an equity investment eligible community, which we have a map that you can use to identify both R3 areas and environmental justice areas. Also includes persons who are graduates of or currently enrolled in the foster care system, or persons who have been formerly incarcerated. When you look at the hubs, the applicants must be at least 18 or above, and eligible persons there means when the applicant pool allows persons whose primary residence is in an equity investment eligible community. 1/3 must be in both an environmental justice or R3 community, and 2/3 can be living in either one or the other. And outside of those geographic areas, the preference and priority is applied to persons who face barriers to employment, including low educational attainment, prior involvement with the criminal legal system, and language barriers, as well as applicants who are graduates of or are currently enrolled in the foster care system, regardless of the person's area of residence. And finally, displaced energy workers, as I talked about before on our goal to having a energy generation primarily by clean, carbon-free methods. A number of the power companies, like for instance, those that are fired by coal, have been closing. And so their workers, those displaced energy workers, as a result, are also eligible. Next slide. And now, on preparing for a strong application, I will turn it over to my colleague, Michelle.
Thanks, Larry. Hi, I'm Michelle Cerruti, and I'm the Southern CEJA Regional Administrator. And I want to talk a little bit about preparing a strong application. So you can go to the next slide, please. So we really cannot stress enough the importance of reading the NOFO thoroughly, and that's the Notice of Funding Opportunity. Um, we're seeing a lot of applicants not addressing certain criteria in our NOFO. Um, this is very important. It contains important information about the expected activities, eligibility criteria, documents, and organizational data that's needed from prospective partners. So you need to be sure you understand all of the program elements. Something else I really want to point out is please do not wait until the deadline to apply. It never fails. There's always a technical issue that may occur. Your internet could go out. There's all kinds of things that could happen. And so we highly recommend that you upload everything, double check everything before you upload so that you don't have any missing documents as well. And we also really, really want to encourage you to take advantage of all of the technical assistance training that's going to be offered. Next slide, please. Something else to really take into consideration is to make sure your organization is a good fit for the purpose of the NOFO that you're applying for. So, does this opportunity align well with your organization's mission and capabilities? Do you have the capacity to administer this grant? Are there any organizations that you can partner with to strengthen your application? So maybe, you want to really play on your strengths and seek out partnerships that can help complement your application. Next slide, please. So these are just a few writing tips when you're developing your presentation. So again, respond to the NOFO, really understand the definitions and the type of training or services that are required. Please definitely pay attention that within the NOFO, there is a link to our curriculum framework if you're applying for a workforce hub that you need to follow. And so that's a separate document. Don't make up your own definitions or terms for people that you'll serve or the type of training you would deliver. Definitely keep on track with the definitions in the NOFO. Your program design should strongly align with the program description and structure. The review criteria should guide your proposal development, and there is no need for creative writing. We really want you to be responsive, respond according to the application format and the elements of the NOFO. And really tell your story, highlight your strengths, the strengths of your team. Make a case for your project and its potential impact. And, we really want to know how qualified your team is to administer this program. Next slide, please. So what does a complete application package look like? You will find all the materials on the NOFO webpage once it's posted in the next few days. There's the uniform grant application. It's a fillable PDF, a uniform budget, which we have a template for your budget. It's very important not only to put your figures into this budget, but we really need a budget narrative that goes right inside this template. And we have seen people forget to do that. So we need a narrative in there. We need conflict of interest disclosures, technical proposal, supplemental project documents. It's all outlined in that NOFO, so please read that carefully. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk a little bit about the process of reviewing an application, because it is a two-step process. There's an administrative review and a merit review. So next slide, please. So step one, the initial administrative review. Your application will not move past this if it doesn't meet administrative review. And so during this review, we're really making sure that you have all the elements that are required in the application package, that you are GATA pre-qualified. So that's very, very important. That you are an eligible applicant, and did you turn your application in on time? Was everything there and complete? We have seen applications that were just only had a partial document or were missing a complete document. And so, out of fairness to all applicants, DCO cannot accept any applications that are late. So, that's another reason we highly encourage you to um, apply before the due date. Next slide, please. So, just to highlight again some additional initial administrative review common problems. Applications were rejected due to lack of GATA pre-qualifications, not following directions, or missing materials, or blank templates even. So we do provide training. We do provide GATA technical assistance training if you need that. There's a lot of training for you to be able to take advantage of. We really want to discuss also the importance of aligning changes and paying attention to the materials that you use and reuse. For instance, a lot of you, which I understand when you're writing grants, you might have some standard language from a previous grant that you want to use just to explain maybe your organization and structure. But be sure if you use that to scrub out any references to other grants. You want to make sure that that is directly related to the NOFO that you're applying for. Also, if you have different staff working on different elements, make sure they align and they don't overlap and don't repeat. So you really want to make sure you have staff assigned to the elements of the NOFO. And again, we also highly, highly recommend you use partners to address each of those elements. So if you're applying for a hub, this is an example, and maybe you're not as familiar with running a barrier reduction program, maybe one of you seek out a partner that's strong in that area. That's just an example. Next slide, please. So after your application passes administrative review, has all the elements we're looking for, all the documents there, was sent on time, then your proposal moves over to the merit review process. And so the merit review process is where the merit review team really digs in and looks at the content of your application and starts scoring that application. And applicants with the highest scoring for each region that meets minimum core thresholds is selected for grant negotiations. So just because you might be the only applicant in your region, you still have to qualify. You have to meet the minimum score threshold. Next slide, please. So I just want to touch on some characteristics of successful applications and some common weaknesses that we see. Next slide, please. So some common weaknesses we've highlighted by underlining on this slide. So again, a staffing plan needs to be very clear and complete and reflect all of the personnel roles required for the program services and administration. And we really want to see resumes of all these key staff, and those resumes should show us the experience that your staff has in providing the service that you've identified them to apply to provide. And so the applicant narrative specifically describe the experience that your organization has administering similar types of projects. Also, application narratives really should describe significant experience and capability using an equity lens for the program operations. And that's so important. And I just want to also mention that sometimes applicants just assume that maybe the merit review team might already know who they are and know their reputation and know their qualifications. Please don't assume that, because our merit review team may not know you. Most likely they don't. And so you really need to make it clear to them uh, through your staffing plan and your resumes and your qualifications and experience that you are qualified to administer these programs. Next slide, please. So documentation of need, that's another area that we're highlighting some common weaknesses that we see. Applications described where the project will operate and who will the project serve, as well as barriers and needs. And the application needs to describe how the local and regional labor market information is used to identify a need for clean energy jobs in your region. So it's very important. There is data out there. We can help you. We do have some links to some data in your region that can help you identify local and regional labor market um, information, jobs in your area for clean energy. There's some links that we can provide for you. Also, be sure your application describes the impact that your project is going to have on your targeted communities and the populations that you're serving. Next slide, please. So project plan and some common weaknesses we see in your project plan. The work plan should be detailed and complete. We really want to see goals and outcomes that align with the NOFO requirements. Again, this is very, very important. Do not forget, you really need to understand that clean energy workforce um, hubs have the clean energy curriculum, and there's a link embedded in that NOFO where you can review that curriculum. Your training programs must be in alignment with that. Plan to help participants transition to employment. This is very important. We need to see a detailed and complete plan that identifies, once that participant completes the training program, how are you transitioning them to a job? Also, just to highlight, to plan and track outcomes, make sure that's detailed and complete, and that the approach for assessing outcomes to improve program delivery is clearly defined, because we're seeing a lot of that missing or not very strong. Next slide, please. So your budget and your cost effectiveness. Some common weaknesses we see here is you need to really thoroughly detail and itemize your budget and include that justification in your narrative in the budget form itself. And there is a section, it's near the bottom of each tab in the budget, where you can write out that narrative. Please be as descriptive as you can. We really need to understand your plans for using the funding that you're requesting. An analysis of the cost efficiency in relationship to the planned outcomes. So it needs to make sense, that it needs to be reasonable how much you're spending in relation to how many people you're going to serve. And also, are you leveraging other programs and services and partnerships? And if you are, how would they benefit from the program? Describe what are the interactions that the MOU process too. You need to have, are you going to have MOUs? Are you going to have subgrant recipients? Typically, subgrant recipients have funding tied to them. MOUs don't necessarily have to have funding. That's usually just a partnership that explains what that partner is going to do. Next slide, please. Wait, go to the next slide. Okay, thanks. So we've invited a couple of guests today to talk to you. These are current grantees, and we have the Rockford Hub region. This is Courtney Geiger and Gina Corona. And Courtney is going to speak a little bit about her process. And then we're going to also have the Alton navigator, who is Senior Services Plus, and that's Emily Jackson. So I'd first like to introduce to you Courtney Geiger with the Workforce Connection and the Goodwill Industries team.
Good
Courtney.
morning. Yeah, thank you for having us today. We have been working on our CEJA grant and with our CEJA team for a while now, and we're excited to share what worked for us in our region and how it might transfer and be applicable in other regions if you're thinking about these opportunities. For us, when we saw these opportunities, it just made sense because of the potential impact that we know these programs can have in our region. So as we looked at these, like I said, it really just made sense. But we had a very full and intensive process as we looked at putting the application together. So as Michelle said, we applied for the Navigator as well as the Network Hub with a group of partners. So there are different leads on the grants. The Workforce Connection, which is our American Job Center, is the lead for the Network Hub. And that just made a whole lot of sense for a number of reasons, because it's work that they already do in our community for other sectors. And then Goodwill, who's a partner in the American Job Center, took the lead for the Navigator program. I will say we also, as a collaborative, applied for the contractor incubator with one of our other partners, Think Big. So our team really approached these grants as an entire network and a group of partners working together, so that as we approached, we were very cohesive in how the grants were going to work together, and how in an ideal world and a best case scenario, they should work together. So as we looked at working and building our team, we really wanted to work with a large group of partners that represented the communities that we are serving. So we looked at both small and larger agencies. We specifically wanted minority-run agencies to be partnering with us, grassroots agencies that are embedded in neighborhoods and in communities. And then, of course, we looked at what our region is with the network area and how we can make sure that entire region is represented, so that we are providing opportunity across the area that is accessible for people to get to in our entire area. So we really did a who's here, who isn't here, who should be at the table, and how do we make sure everybody can play their role that works for them, and that can either build their capacity or help them expand what they're doing, or get into the sector. Our approach to designing the program was really sitting down together and whiteboarding and flow charting it out. And, a big piece of that was, as Michelle and Larry both said earlier, making sure we were all very intimately aware of the NOFO and what was required. I would also give a huge shout out to the FAQ document. Read through that. It's really, really helpful. And then as we did that, we'd bring our large printouts to the table and we whiteboarded things to make sure we were addressing what we needed to, and that the end goal was really people getting into jobs in the clean energy sector, not just people getting training. So it was really important for us to make sure we knew the landscape as well in the area, so that we weren't training for training's sake, but really training for the jobs that are here and the jobs that will be here. Another thing we did is we did have a neutral party, our regional planning council, at the table, providing data, helping all of us partners write the application together, so that we really were making sure we were all compromising to what should be done, who should take what roles. If people wanted to take stretch roles, really talking through that and figuring out how it could and should work. And at the end of the day, we centered ourselves throughout the whole process, and we have to center ourselves in equity. We have to center ourselves in what's going to make the most impact and be the best for our community, not the best for any one of our agencies. So there was a lot of give and take, a lot of compromise, but I think we've got to the point where we all feel really good about what we're doing. We did build a program that is intended to build capacity in some of our smaller agencies, and give everyone opportunities to grow and expand as well. And I think we built a program that we're really proud of. We're excited about the opportunity for this. We've got employers that are really excited, which is always a good sign. And I think just really taking your time on this application and also being practical. Of course, in the beginning, we all dreamt of these things that we said, okay, here's the dream. Here's what we can realistically do. And how do we do that? And maybe in year 3, then we'll go to the dream scenario. So we met together every single Friday for a while we were writing these applications. We met in person, we sat down at tables. We really took it very seriously and made it work. And I think that's what's helped us now, because now that we're implementing, we have all that pre-work built in. I will say that we still meet every other week now in the implementation process, because now that we got it, we're writing our policies together. We're writing everything so that we're all on the same page. So nobody's on an island here. It's really a team approach for us. And I think that's what's going to be best for our community. So happy to answer any questions. I don't know if they'll be later, or I'll put my contact information if anyone needs it as well. So thanks for having us to share our experience.
Thank you so much, Courtney. And again, Courtney is the Energy Transition Navigator with Goodwill Industries of Northern Illinois, and Gina Corona, who's on the call, but I think she's traveling, is Workforce Connections, who is their workforce hub. And so, yes, if you have any questions, please post those in the chat. And I thank you so much for bringing up the FAQ and how important that is, and how much good information's in there. All those documents, or that FAQ document, can be found on our website, which we will have linked in our presentation. So now I'd like to introduce Emily Jackson, and Emily is from Alton, the Alton area, and she represents Senior Services Plus. They are the navigator for the Alton region. So, Emily?
Good morning. Thank you. So I'm probably going to echo a lot of what Courtney has already said, and a lot of what everybody else has already said when talking about this funding opportunity. When we were building our team and our partners, we looked at local community people whose strengths complemented what our strengths and experience were. We looked at what is the goal of this opportunity, and who is doing work that is applicable or has experience that is applicable, that's going to make it a good fit. Networking was really key to identifying our navigator partner and talking with other people who are in the community, letting them know what we were interested in and who we were looking for. And that's kind of how we got connected with the navigator partner, was they were talking with someone else about the opportunity as well. So it ended up being a really great fit. And some of that networking was even through the DCEO calls, the presentations, the networking meetings. So taking advantage of those was very, very essential to our success. We also had multiple meetings with various partners to understand the roles outlined in the grant, how those align with the potential partners in the community to make sure that we're finding the best fit. For our approach and our design, we really kept going back to the NOFO, aligning our outreach strategies with the target audience, identifying the end goal of this and working backwards. And then identifying who's working with these target audience and identifying the strategies that have worked previously, or how could we adapt current strategies to meet the target audience where they are. And then ensuring those tactics and the implementation are centered around that equity and accessibility, and using that lens when we were working through each of those individual approaches. As far as completing our application, I probably read the NOFO 20 times at least, and I know all the partners did the same. Giving yourself enough time to write, step away, come back and review it has been really helpful for us. It feels like a tight deadline, but getting as much done as you can and then giving yourself a break to come back and review again really made an impact when we were editing and reviewing our approaches. We consulted all of our partners. We made sure they were engaged and working in the document as well. We often used like a Google Doc or a live Microsoft Word document so that everybody could have input and be able to edit live in the document so that we could all see the edits. We also attended all the DCO informational sessions just like this, and those were immensely helpful. You know, it took me quite a while to really grasp some of the concepts and the goals, and attending these types of informational sessions was key. And I just kept attending and kept writing down questions and taking notes. And as far as DCEO technical assistance and resources, we attended everything. We used the FAQ document, asked questions. You know, we ended up applying twice because we did get rejected the first round. And we used the feedback to take back. We met internally, reviewed the feedback, created our own understanding, and then used technical assistance appointments to clarify that our understanding was truly in alignment with the NOFO. So using all of the resources that DCEO has offered when going through this process was key. And then just to echo Courtney, really engaging with your partners in the community to make sure everybody's on the same page and working towards the same goal. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, go ahead, Nate. Go right ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, thanks, Emily, and want to give a special shout out to all of our grantee guest speakers today. And I will jump in here and give you some information about NOFO resources. So I am Nate Keener. I'm the CEJA Central Regional Administrator for the CEJA Workforce Programs. And yeah, we'd like to talk about some of the resources you can utilize to help you write a good grant application. And I will go ahead and take over the screen sharing here. So excuse me for a small interruption. Up. Here. All right. So whenever we post a NOFO, we'll post a NOFO page for each grant that has an open NOFO. And that page will have the important directory information about the grant, like the CSFA number, the contact, the due date, the award size, etc. But it'll also have a link to the NOFO supplement, which is the PDF file that has all the elements of the NOFO and what you need to complete an application. That page will also have links to the other forms you'll need for your app, like budget forms, and you'll be able to find the NOFO page from this page that I'm showing you right now. So this, if you haven't checked this out already, please do. Probably a good idea to bookmark this. You'll probably be coming back pretty frequently. And from this page, you're going to get all of the late-breaking updates on all of the CEJA programs that DCEO is managing. And so for our purposes, we would want to click here, programs currently accepting applications, which really just scrolls you down just a little bit. And then you'll see here all of the programs. Here are the two that you'll want to key in on, Navigator and Workforce Hub programs, but obviously we don't have those NOFOs posted yet. So I wanted to scroll down here and just show you what one of those pages looks like. So the Equitable Energy Future Grant Program is open right now, and they're accepting applications. And if we jump over to that page, this is the page where you will have the NOFO supplement, which is right here, and that's the PDF document that really has all of those elements. A lot of people might consider that itself the NOFO, right? It's that PDF document that has all the elements of the grant program in it. But you can see up here, it also has, the contact name at the agency, the CSFA number, total program funding, the amount that each award is expected to award, application date ranges, things like that. Also, I mentioned some of the other application documents like budget templates and disclosure forms and all that kind of good stuff. So also we'll have recordings and upcoming sessions for TA on that page. So definitely check that out. Let's see. Also wanted to jump to this next slide here. And every time we post a new NOFO, we also usually have a bidders conference, which is a webinar where we walk through the NOFO and the important elements of that program. We also usually host a budget and a GATA webinar where we talk about the important elements of registering with GATA and completing the budget. So we've linked here, and it'll be in the slides that we send out as well as the follow-up email that we send out too. We've linked here a recording of one of our previous bidders conferences for these programs. So this is the one that we did for round 2 back in January. And like I said, we don't have the NOFO posted yet, so we don't have links for the bidders conference or a NOFO, but we will send those to you as soon as those are posted and applicable. So if you're somewhat new to CEJA and just learning what the programs are and how they work, those bidders conferences, even those previous ones, will have tons of good info. Walk through each program, how it's intended to work, and what the required elements of the NOFO are. So check that out. In addition to those, those kind of standard NOFO rollout components, we also have a permanent repository of video resources at our video training and resources page. And this is a DCEO page here. And there you'll find 21 training videos. They're short videos on topics like applying for a grant, pre-qualification, common missteps, budget overviews, audits, reporting, 2 CFR 200 tips for your light reading, and more. We've also posted here in this presentation, which again we'll send out after the event, links to a number of webinars that we've also hosted in the past that are specific to certain aspects of grant writing for CEJA programs. We have the Workforce 101 grant, Workforce Grants 101 recording, which is a standard GATA webinar. And and we host that for CEJA grants. We also have the applicant team qualifications and budget webinars from January. And then finally, we have the rolling back the curtain, what our CEJA merit reviewers looking for webinar from earlier this year, linked as well. All of these videos are great for folks who need a little help with the grant writing aspect of all of this, but you might also consider working with a grant writer. Some grant writers are professional and charge for their services. Others are volunteers, and so if you're a CBO, consider activating your network to see if anybody has experience writing grants, as those are great resources to tap internally. The next resource I wanted to talk a little bit about, and was already mentioned here by one of our grantees, is the CEJA Q&A document. And just a word of warning, this document is long. It's basically a catalog of all the questions that we've been asked about CEJA programs and our responses to those questions. So if somebody emails us a question, we answer it and we add it to the list. If they ask us a question at an outreach or a networking event like this one, we answer it and add it to the list. So to use it, you probably want to start at the top of the document and use the table of contents here to find the program and potentially even the topic that you want to explore. You can even click within the table of contents here and it'll take you directly to that section of the document. And so, for our purposes, if we wanted to, we had a specific question about the Clean Jobs Workforce Network program, the Workforce Hubs, or the Energy Transition Navigators program, we would just scroll down to this section of the table of contents here and say, well, I have questions about the application process for the Energy Transition Navigators program. We'll click on that and it'll bring us right to page 79 for those application questions. And so definitely want to check that out. A lot of the questions may have already been answered, but we are always surprised by the new angle on questions that we get. So check that out and definitely don't hesitate to reach us if you don't find your answer there. I also wanted to give just a little bit of detail on how this process works. So if you submit a question to us, we may be able to answer it right away, especially if the question has already been asked in the past. So we can just answer it and link you to the Q&A, to this Q&A document, right? But if we haven't been asked that question before, we may need to take it back to the lab. In many cases, we want our policies to be aligned with the policies of other DCEO grant programs. We're working with similar accounting systems and under the same set of state and federal laws. So there will be some overlap there. So we want to make sure that those other programs agree with how we answer your question in some cases. And our unit has leadership, and that leadership reports to the leadership of our office, who reports to the leadership of the agency, who report to the governor. And sometimes we need sign off on new policies that we're creating from folks somewhere along that chain, right? Sometimes we need to create a new policy to address your question. Sometimes we need to pull in other agencies or other stakeholder groups to review the policies that we're creating in response to your question. For example, participants in our programs will register on the IPA Energy Equity Portal so that clean energy employers can find them. IPA is the Illinois Power Agency, and so they need to know who's signing up on their platform. So they need to know every detail about our eligibility. So if we change something about our policy as it relates to eligibility, IPA needs to know so that they can account for that change in their system, right? Finally, the law was written by a large network of stakeholders, and many of the policies that we write or clarify impact the populations that are represented by and served by those stakeholders. So sometimes we need those stakeholders to review our responses about the law before making them public to ensure we're staying aligned with their expectations about the law too. All of this to say that sometimes responding to your question can take time. Sometimes we can answer the question in a matter of hours. Sometimes it might take a couple weeks, so please be patient. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and come back to the presentation here. Right, and there we go. So just a couple of additional ideas here. If you've applied for a CEJA grant in the past and have been denied, you may request a summary of feedback from the merit review process. You can simply contact Charlotte Flickinger to request that summary. You can also request one-on-one technical assistance from a CEJA NOFO coach. They can help you better understand the NOFO and work with you on how to approach it. Of course, keep your eyes peeled for additional technical assistance webinars. And it's probably a good idea to reach out if you haven't already to community leaders to see what assistance they might be able to provide. Here's the info on the CEJA NOFO coach opportunity. If you follow the link here on the screen or at the QR code, you'll be directed to a page where you can sign up for this one-on-one technical assistance offering with a NOFO coach. You can sign up for several sessions. If you think you'll want to follow up a few times, there is a limit of 3 sessions per applicant team, however. And here's some insight into what you can expect from the one-on-one sessions, as well as the TA webinars. We can help you to an extent, right? We can't tell you, oh, that's a good idea. You should keep that in your application, or no, that's not a good idea. Don't do that. We can't say, oh yeah, that'll get you points with merit review, or we can't do anything like that. But we can let you know if you're on the right track as far as what the NOFO expects. An application can be completed correctly and still score low, right? So the NOFO coaches in our webinars can help you understand if your application complies, but it's up to you, the grantee, the applicant, to make sure that it's good. And so now comes the interactive portion of the event today, and we want to do a little interaction with you here based on kind of Family Feud. So if you're familiar with the Family Feud game, we aren't keeping track of points here. We don't actually have a competition, but want to ask you all to kind of put on your thinking caps here, think about what you've heard in this webinar, think about your experience in writing grants and the programs that you're proposing here. And want you to think about these questions. I've got several questions here. The first one is, when considering applying for a grant, what are the top 5 most important questions to ask as it relates to who? And so for an example, I will say, I'll give you one answer here. Who will your program serve? And so if you would, please come off mute, or feel free to type your response in the chat, just looking for responses to what are the important who questions to answer when considering applying for one of these programs. Who's got an answer for me? Anybody want to come off mute and say what are the important who questions to ask?
Sure. I've got one. Who are the employers that I will be looking to place my workforce with?
Yep, that's a good one. I see in the chat there, equity eligible individuals. So it's kind of an offshoot of the who will your program serve, right? What equity eligible populations are we going to be targeting? Who will your partners be? Yep, exactly. Educational entities, exactly. So who are going to the educational partners, maybe your training providers. Identifying the under-resourced Black and brown young men and women in urban communities. Persons who can benefit from training and job placement. All right, yeah, these are all good. Here are the ones that we had too. I don't think any of these are wrong. Who is your training provider? So we saw that in the educational entities. Who are your grant partners? I think I saw that one too. Who are your employer partners? And maybe saw several people touching on this one. Who are the important stakeholders who should be brought on to evaluate your program and spread the word? Awesome. Okay, and then the next one, same format, same idea. What are the top 5 important questions to ask as it relates to what? And I'll give you another example. What training will be offered by your program? What are the other options here, or other questions you should be asking about your program as it relates to what? What are our goals and objectives? Yes, exactly.
What additional certifications could we get those individuals?
There you go. Yep. Credentials, certifications, earn, jobs to be placed in. Yep. 3 people answered that same one at the same time. Any extras? All right, here's what I had. And yep, what credentials will participants be working toward? What occupations will the training lead to? And I saw the translating into employability, portability. What will the work-based learning be? Remember, 10% of the time should be work-based learning. And then what will be the impact of this work in the community where it's done? And that kind of goes to the response that was, what are our goals and objectives, right? But also, I think bigger picture, right? What happens when we're done with this work? How is the community impacted by this? What changes have we seen? And then we got one more here. What are the top, and we got six of them here. What are the top 6 questions to ask as it relates to how much and how many? And the example here is how much barrier reduction funding will your participants need? Who's got some good thoughts there? There's some stumping folks, it looks like. What type of supportive services will be needed by our participants? Okay, yep, there you go.
How far is the outreach
How far is the outreach? Okay.
between this CEJA hubs? Or how much money will this bring into the community overall?
There's a good one. How much time will employers need to place future employees? Okay, cool. Yep, these are good ones. I think we're getting a couple here that are not on my list, but also very good questions to ask as you write your grant. All right, well, I'll show us a few more here. So how many people will you serve? How much is the cost per participant? So that's a good one to review at the end of your application, right? Is okay, as a measure of kind of budget efficiency, right? How much does it actually cost us to train and place a participant in a job? How much funding will your grant request? Always an important one, and always want to make sure. I think it was mentioned before. Think it was mentioned before that want to make sure you're aligning, keeping your budget aligned at all times. And so as you're making changes to the narrative, if that changes the impact that it'll have on the budget, make sure you're calculating that appropriately. And then finally, I think I have two more actually. How many jobs will be earned by the participants? And finally, by how much will their wages increase? And so obviously a big piece of this job is, or a big piece of these programs is, we want to ensure that participants are getting jobs with family sustaining wages. And I think that's all I have. And so I appreciate everybody's participation in this, some really great ideas. And again, these will be in the slide deck when we send it back out to you, so you'll be able to review these and kind of think about these questions as you write your application. And with that, I will turn it back over to Larry Dawson.
Thanks, Nate. That's a lot of great information. We're hoping that each of you will be able to make use of all that as you plan to prepare your applications for one of the two available types of grants. We're looking for applications for the Clean Jobs Workforce Network program in Carbondale, Danville, Kankakee, and Peoria. And we're looking for energy transition navigators in Champaign and also the Kankakee area. One of the things that I wanted to mention about particularly for folks who are here specifically about Kankakee, is that since the legislation does not allow for that program to get started until July, or that hub anyway area to get started as a unique and new hub until July 1st of 2025, the NOFO release for that will be later than the one for the other identified hub areas. And so what we encourage everyone to do, whether you're on the sooner NOFO timeline or the later one, is to start doubling down on your partnering activities. As our grantee partners mentioned, as well as my colleagues, partnership is the name of the game, and use your time wisely in identifying partners who can help strengthen the case for approving your application. Make sure that you're using a checklist of sorts to go through the NOFO to make sure that all the major components that are required are there, and make use of technical assistance. As was mentioned earlier, there is a sizable um, um, document with Q&A answers for all that has come up to this point. I think it would be hugely helpful. The NOFO for all but Kankakee is expected out within the next week or so, with a expected deadline around November 1st. We wanted to try to provide as close as possible to 60 days of application time as possible. So again, don't wait until the last moment to get your application submitted. Certainly make sure that all key components are addressed. And however we can help you, we will try. And the best email to use to reach us is ceo.ceja@illinois.gov. And we are very excited that so many of you joined us today, and we look forward to working with those who will come on as grantees.